The trap is sprung. What you don't know could cost you thousands. You're standing in the terminal, and your world just collapsed. 4 hours. That's how long you've been waiting. The connecting flight, the one that was supposed to get you home, or to that crucial meeting, or to your family, that flight is long gone. Your itinerary is obliterated. Your plans are destroyed. And the stress is real. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of uncertainty, a gate agent appears. Or you navigate through the airline's digital labyrinth online. And then comes the response. The same response millions of travelers hear every single year. It's swift, it's practiced, and it's absolutely deliberately designed to make you stop asking questions. We deeply regret the disruption to your travel plans. As a goodwill gesture for the inconvenience, we'd like to offer you a $50 electronic travel certificate. $50. That's it. That's what they think your time, your stress, your ruined plans, and your legal rights are worth. A $50 voucher that expires in a year, a $50 credit you can only spend with them, a $50 insult masquerading as compensation. And here's the part that makes my blood boil. You probably took it. You probably felt a wave of relief wash over you, thinking, well, at least I'm getting something. Maybe you even thanked the gate agent. Maybe you clicked accept without hesitation. Maybe you genuinely believed that this pathetic voucher represented the absolute limit of what you were legally entitled to claim. This belief, this comfortable, convenient misconception is exactly what the airline industry is banking on. They are betting their enormous profits on your ignorance. They are counting on you accepting that $50 gesture and walking away, convinced that justice has been served. But here's the truth that the airlines desperately don't want you to know. That $50 voucher isn't compensation. It's a calculated, manipulative payoff designed specifically to keep you from claiming the hundreds or even thousands of dollars in cold, hard cash that might legally be yours right now. I'm here to expose the covert game that airlines have been running on passengers for decades. And I'm going to show you exactly what they're hiding from you. In 2024 alone, the European Union saw over 218,000 flight disruptions, resulting in more than 6.5 billion in compensation payouts. That's an astronomical number. But here's what's even more shocking. The vast majority of that compensation was never claimed. Millions upon millions of euros, literally billions of dollars, went uncollected because passengers had no idea they had the right to claim it. They accepted their $50 vouchers and went home, completely unaware that they were leaving mountains of cash on the table. And the airlines, they were thrilled. Because every passenger who accepted that voucher instead of filing a legitimate claim meant millions of dollars staying in the airline's pocket instead of going to the people who earned it through their inconvenience and suffering. This is a problem. This is a massive systemic problem that affects everyone who flies. Whether you're a frequent business traveler, a family taking a vacation, a travel agent booking for clients, or someone who just flies occasionally, you are vulnerable to this scheme. And most of you don't even know it's happening. Here's what's about to happen in the next 20 to 30 minutes. I'm going to walk you through the regulations that protect you. I'm going to show you the exact compensation amounts you're entitled to depending on where you're flying and what caused your delay. I'm going to explain why the airline industry is terrified of you knowing this information. And most importantly, I'm going to give you the precise, actionable steps you need to take to claim the compensation you legally deserve. But there's an urgency to this that most people don't realize. The regulations are changing. The airline industry is actively lobbying to reduce passenger protections and lower compensation amounts. If you've experienced a delay, you need to act now. You have a window of opportunity. Sometimes it's 6 years, sometimes it's less, but that window will eventually close. And if you wait until the new regulations take effect, some of your rights could disappear permanently. This isn't just about getting money back. This is about holding the airline industry accountable. This is about refusing to accept their manipulation. This is about understanding that you have rights, powerful rights, and the law is on your side if you're willing to use it. So if you've ever been delayed, if you've ever been canceled, if you've ever watched your travel plans fall apart because of something the airline did or failed to do, this video is for you. And I promise you, by the end of it, you're going to see that $50 voucher for exactly what it is: an insult, a distraction, and a betrayal of your legal rights. Let's get started. The hidden truth. What airlines don't want you to know. Let me tell you something that the airline industry has worked incredibly hard to keep quiet. They have entire departments, legal teams, public relations, specialists, corporate strategists whose job is to make sure you never find out what I'm about to tell you. Because the moment you understand this, the game is over for them. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Airlines know exactly how much money they owe you when you're delayed. They know it to the penny. They have teams of lawyers who have studied every regulation, every loophole, every way to minimize their liability. But they also know something else, something even more valuable to them than the money itself. They know that you don't know, and that ignorance is worth billions of dollars to them every single year. Think about the math for a second. An airline knows that if they offer you a $50 voucher that expires in a year and can only be spent with them, most passengers will accept it and move on. They'll feel like they got something, even if it's pathetic. They'll go home and tell themselves, well, I got $50 out of it, and the airline gets to avoid paying you what you're actually entitled to. But what if you were entitled to $600 or $750, or in some cases, thousands of dollars? What if that $50 voucher was actually a settlement offer on a claim worth 10, 15, or 20 times that amount? That's exactly what's happening. That's the trap. Here's the business reality that most passengers never consider. An airline's profit margins are incredibly thin. Most airlines operate on margins of just 2 to 5%. That's razor thin, which means that compensation payouts hit them hard. If every single passenger who experienced a significant delay filed a legitimate compensation claim and won, it would fundamentally change the airline industry's financial picture. The costs would be astronomical. So what do? They suppress the information. They bury the regulations in dense legal language. They make the claim process so complicated and intimidating that most people just give up. And they offer vouchers, cheap restricted use vouchers as a first line of defense against claims. The airline industry is banking on you being tired, stressed, and ignorant. They're betting that you won't have the energy to fight. And they're almost always right. But it gets worse. Because the system they've created isn't just morally wrong, it's deliberately designed to exploit a legal gray area that varies depending on where you are in the world. Let me break this down by region. Because your rights depend entirely on where your flight departs from. If you're flying from any airport in the European Union, the European Economic Area, or the United Kingdom, you are protected by one of the strongest passenger protection laws in the world. EU Regulation 261/2004, known as EU261. This is not an airline policy. This is not a guideline or a recommendation. This is codified, binding law that has been in effect for over 20 years. It mandates fixed cash compensation for significant delays and cancellations. The amounts are non-negotiable. The law is absolute. And the airline industry hates it. EU 261 requires airlines to pay €250, approximately $270 USD, for flights under 1,500 kilometers delayed 3 or more hours. €400, approximately $430 USD, for flights between 1,500 and 3,500 kilometers delayed 3 or more hours. €600, approximately $650 USD, for flights over 3,500 kilometers, delayed 3 or more hours. This applies regardless of your ticket class. This applies regardless of the airline's nationality. This applies regardless of your nationality. If the flight departs from EU or UK territory, EU 261 protects you, period. But here's the critical detail that most airlines count on you not understanding. The only significant exception to these compensation requirements is something called extraordinary circumstances. This is the airline's escape hatch. Bad weather, security risks, air traffic control strikes, bird strikes. These are considered extraordinary circumstances beyond the airline's control. But here's what isn't extraordinary. A mechanical failure discovered during pre-flight checks, a crew scheduling problem, an aircraft arriving late from a previous flight, a software glitch. These are operational issues, and they're the airline's responsibility. Yet airlines constantly try to claim extraordinary circumstances for these operational failures, hoping that passengers won't know the difference. In fact, 2024 data shows that EU261 compensation claims resulted in over 6.5 billion in payouts across the European Union. That's not a small amount of money. That's a seismic financial impact on the industry. And the airline industry has decided that they're going to fight back not by improving their operations, but by lobbying to change the law itself. Now, if you're flying solely within the United States, the situation is dramatically different. The Department of Transportation oversees airline operations, but, and this is a huge but, the US framework is fundamentally weaker than EU 261. Airlines operating domestically in the United States are not legally required to provide monetary compensation for delays caused by factors outside their direct operational control. Think about that for a second. Weather delays, air traffic control restrictions, runway issues, these are weather and operations issues, and in the US, the airline bears no financial responsibility to you if they're the cause of the delay. What the DOT does require is care and assistance. Hello? I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. There's no automatic $600 payout. There's just negotiation. And most passengers don't know they can negotiate. So they don't. According to 2024 data from the DOT, passengers rarely claim monetary compensation for US domestic delays because they simply don't know they can. The system is designed to be opaque. The airline presents you with a voucher, and most people accept it without realizing they might have leverage to demand cash instead. And then there's the Montreal Convention, which applies to international flights. This is a complex agreement that allows claims up to approximately SDR 4,150, about $5,700 USD, for confirmed damages like lost wages, emotional distress, or severe luggage delays. But the Montreal Convention is notoriously difficult to use for simple delay compensation. The burden of proof is on you. You have to demonstrate quantifiable damages. It's legal warfare, and most passengers don't have the resources or knowledge to fight it. So here's what we have. Europe has a powerful, clear, easy-to-use compensation regime. The US has almost nothing, and international flights fall into a legal gray zone that favors the airlines. This fragmented system is intentional. The airline industry has successfully lobbied to keep passenger protection laws weak and fragmented across different regions. Because fragmentation means confusion. Confusion means fewer claims. Fewer claims means more profit. But here's what should terrify the airline industry, and what I want to terrify you into action. You have more power than you realize. Even if you're in the US where the law is weak, you can still claim, you can still fight, you can still win. It just requires knowledge, documentation, and persistence. 3 things that most passengers lack because the airlines have deliberately kept this information hidden. And they've done an excellent job. In 2024, only 1 to 5% of passengers who were entitled to compensation actually filed claims. That means 95% of entitled passengers left money on the table. They accepted vouchers, they went home, and the airlines pocketed billions. But not anymore. Not if you watch this video and understand what's really happening. The compensation schedule. How much money are you actually entitled to? This is where things get concrete. This is where you stop talking in generalities and start calculating exactly how much money you should be demanding from the airline. And I want you to really sit with these numbers, because they're going to show you exactly how much that $50 voucher was insulting you. Let's start with EU 261, because this is where the most money is available. Under EU 261, the compensation you're entitled to depends on 3 factors: the distance of your flight, the length of your delay, and whether your flight was canceled or significantly delayed. For flights under 1,500 kilometers, that's roughly a flight from New York to Miami or London to Paris. If you experience a delay of 3 or more hours, you're entitled to 250 euros. That's approximately $270 USD. Not massive, but it's actual money. Cash. Transferable. No expiration date. No restrictions. For flights between 1,500 and 3,500 kilometers, think London to Cairo or New York to Sao Paulo, the compensation is €400. That's about $430 USD. And for flights over 3,500 kilometers, transatlantic flights, long-haul international journeys, you're entitled to €600. That's approximately $650 USD. Now, here's where it gets interesting. These amounts apply per passenger. If you're traveling with your spouse and 2 children, and you all experience the same delay, you're each entitled to the full amount. A family of 4 on a transatlantic flight delayed by 4 hours? That's €2,400. That's roughly $2,600 USD. In cold hard cash. How many families do you think accept a $50 voucher instead of fighting for $2,600? The answer is almost all of them. Because they don't know. Because the airline didn't tell them. Because the airline counted on their exhaustion and their ignorance. But wait, there's more. The EU261 compensation isn't just for delays. It also applies to cancellations. If your flight is canceled and you're not offered rebooking within a certain time frame, you're entitled to the same compensation amounts. Except in cancellation cases, the airline's only escape is extraordinary circumstances. And that definition is narrower than most people think. Now, the EU261 regulations are in flux. I need to be transparent about this because it affects your strategy. In 2024 to 2025, the European Union is debating changes to EU261. The current proposal, and this is being voted on right now, would increase the threshold for compensation from 3 hours to 4 or 6 hours depending on flight distance. It would also reduce compensation amounts to €300, €500. The airline industry is pushing hard for these changes because they would save them an estimated €3 billion annually. Here's my advice. If you have a delay claim, file it now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Because if the new regulations pass, and they likely will, you might lose eligibility for claims that would have been payable under the current rules. This is a closing window. Act accordingly. Moving to the United States. The DOT doesn't have a fixed compensation schedule like EU261, but, and this is important, the airline industry's own contract of carriage often contains compensation commitments. Some airlines will pay cash for delays caused by their own operational failures. Others will offer vouchers. The problem is that most passengers never read the contract of carriage, and they don't know what they can demand. Additionally, if a U.S. domestic flight is overbooked, and you're involuntarily bumped, the DOT requires the airline to pay you compensation, $775 if you arrive 1 to 2 hours late, or $1,550 if you arrive more than 2 hours late. This is actual required compensation, yet most passengers don't know it exists. So when they're bumped, they accept whatever the gate agent offers them. For the Montreal Convention, which applies to international flights, compensation can reach approximately SDR 4,150, which is roughly $5,700 USD. But claiming under Montreal is complicated because you have to prove actual damages. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. At an average payout of €400 per person, that's €26 million in compensation that was paid out. But here's the part that should enrage you. If every single passenger who was entitled to compensation had filed a claim, the number would have been closer to €8 billion. Not millions, billions. The difference between what was paid and what should have been paid represents the dollar amount of the airline industry's theft enabled by passenger ignorance and airline suppression of information. In the United States, the DOT doesn't publish comprehensive statistics on delay-related compensation claims. But flight delay statistics show that in 2024, over 27 million passengers experienced delays of 15 minutes or more. If even 5% of those passengers were entitled to cash compensation and only 1% of them actually claimed it, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that went unclaimed. Let me put this in perspective another way. According to data from flight compensation companies like Flightright and flight-delayed.co.uk, the average successful claim is worth €943 per passenger. That company processed over 400,000 claims in 2024, resulting in nearly €380 million in successful payouts. That's one company. One company helping passengers collect what they were already legally entitled to. Now, Flightright charges a commission, typically 20 to 30% of the payout. So the airline saves nothing by paying through a compensation company instead of directly to the passenger. In fact, they lose more money because they have to cover the company's fees. Yet many passengers still prefer using these companies because navigating the claim process directly is so intimidating. Here's the moral calculus. If you're owed €600 and you use a compensation company that takes 25% commission, you get €450. If you file the claim yourself, you get the full €600. But if you're too tired or too intimidated to file yourself, and you end up with €450 from the company instead of the $50 voucher the airline offered, you're still €400 richer than you would have been if you'd just accepted the voucher and given up. The airlines are betting that you'll choose the voucher. The question is, are you going to prove them right? Let me give you one more concrete example to drive this home. Imagine you're traveling with your family. 5 people. You're flying from London to New York, a flight of 3,500 plus kilometers. Your flight is canceled due to a mechanical issue discovered during pre-flight maintenance. You're rebooked on a flight 4 hours later. Under EU261, you're entitled to €600 per person for the cancellation. That's €600 times 5 people equals €3,000. In USD, approximately $3,250, the airline offers each of you a $50 voucher, a total of $250 for your entire family. Do the math yourself. The airline is trying to settle a €3,000 claim for $250. That's a 92% reduction in what you're owed. That's highway robbery with a smile and an apology. And it works. It works because most people don't know the numbers. Most people accept the voucher. And the airline pockets €2,750. But what if you knew? What if you understood that you were being offered a settlement worth 92% less than what you were entitled to? Would you still accept? I'm betting you wouldn't. And that's exactly why the airline industry is so desperate to keep you ignorant. The claim strategy, how to actually get your money. Here's what separates the passengers who get paid from the passengers who accept $50 vouchers. Knowledge and action. You now have the knowledge. Now I'm going to give you the action plan. This is the part where most people fail. Not because they can't succeed, because they absolutely can, but because they don't follow through. The airline industry is counting on this. They're counting on you getting angry watching this video, feeling motivated to file a claim, and then doing nothing. Life gets busy. You forget. The moment passes. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Second, save your boarding pass. Not just a screenshot, save every version. Your original booking confirmation, your updated ticket, everything. These prove that you were supposed to be on that flight. Third, screenshot every single piece of communication. When the airline sends you an email about the delay, screenshot it. If they post information on their website or app, screenshot that too. If they make an announcement over the loudspeaker and you can record it, do it. The key here is capturing the airline's stated reason for the delay. If they say, due to a technical issue, screenshot that. If they say, crew scheduling problem, screenshot that. If they say, aircraft arriving late, screenshot that. This is critical evidence because it proves the cause of the delay and it puts responsibility squarely on the airline. Fourth, document your expenses. Keep every receipt. If the airline doesn't offer you meals during a long delay and you buy your own food, keep that receipt. If you're forced to stay overnight and book a hotel, keep that receipt. If you rent a car to get home, keep that receipt. If you miss a business meeting and lose income, document that loss. These are all damages you can claim in addition to the fixed compensation amounts. Fifth, write down everything you remember about the delay in detail. The time it was announced, the exact words used by staff, the time the corrected flight departed, the impact on your plans, your emotional state, anything relevant. Do this while it's fresh. Don't wait a week. Do it that day or the next day. Your memory is your witness, and you want it to be as accurate as possible. Step 2. Determine your regulatory leverage. Now that you have your evidence, you need to figure out which law gives you the strongest claim. Ask yourself these questions. Did your flight depart from the EU, UK, or EEA? If yes, EU261 applies. This is your best case scenario. You have a clear, fixed compensation amount with minimal defenses available to the airline. You're in the strongest position possible. Was your flight international? Departing from outside the EU? If yes, the Montreal Convention might apply. This gives you potential leverage, but the process is more complex. Was your flight domestic within the United States? If yes, you're working with DOT regulations and the airline's contract of carriage. You'll need to reference the specific airline's policy and argue based on operational failures. If you're not sure which regulation applies, there are free online tools, flightrights.com, AirAdvisor, and others that can tell you in seconds. Step 3. File the formal claim. This is where most people fail. They call the airline, they speak to a gate agent, they send a polite email to customer service. Don't do any of that, not first. Instead, send a formal, written claim via certified mail or through the airline's official legal complaint portal. You want an official record. You want a dated, stamped acknowledgement that you filed a claim. You want proof. Your letter should follow this structure: your name, address, contact information, and the date. Subject line: formal compensation claim. Flight number, date of flight, body. State the facts clearly. On date, I was a ticketed passenger on flight number from departure to destination. The flight was delayed number of hours due to reasons stated by airline. Reference the applicable regulation explicitly. Pursuant to regulation A, No 261 over 2004, I am entitled to compensation for this delay. State the amount you're claiming. I am entitled to €600 under Article 7 of EU 261. This is non-negotiable compensation required by EU law. Include your supporting documentation list. Attached to this claim are copies of my boarding pass, ticket confirmation, photographs of the delay announcement, screenshots of airline communications detailing the reason for delay, and receipts for expenses incurred. Set a deadline. I expect payment within 14 days of receipt of this letter. If payment is not received, I will escalate this claim to relevant authority compensation company. Sign it professionally. Include copies of all documentation. Send this via certified mail or email through the airline's official legal complaints email address, not customer service. You want an official record. Step 4. What happens next? In my experience, here's what typically happens. Scenario A. The airline receives your formal claim, realizes you know what you're doing, and pays within 14 days. This happens more often than people realize because airlines would rather pay than deal with formal escalation. Scenario B, common case. The airline issues a generic denial saying extraordinary circumstances or safety reasons or something equally vague. They're hoping you'll give up. Don't give up. This is where you escalate. For EU 261 claims, you have several options. Option 1. File a complaint with the National Enforcement Body, NEB, in the country where your flight departed. In the UK, it's the Civil Aviation Authority, CAA. In Germany, it's the Luftfahrtbundesamt. In France, it's the DGAC. These are government agencies with actual teeth. When you file with them, the airline has to respond officially. This is more serious than an email, and it carries weight. Option 2. Use a flight compensation company like Flightright, flight-delayed.co.uk, or AirAdvisor. These companies specialize in EU 261 claims. They take a commission, typically 20 to 30%, but they handle the entire process. They have lawyers, they have relationships with the authorities, they have a 97% success rate on valid claims. For a passenger who's intimidated by the process, this is often the best choice. According to 2024 data, compensation companies have recovered over €380 million in the past year alone. They've processed over 400,000 successful claims. These companies exist because they work. For U.S. domestic flights, your escalation options are more limited. The DOT doesn't have the same enforcement power as the European NEBs, but you can still file a formal complaint with the DOT's Aviation Consumer Protection Division. This creates an official record and forces the airline to respond to a federal body. It's slower than EU261, but it adds credibility to your claim. For truly stubborn airlines, consider small claims court. In many U.S. jurisdictions, small claims can handle amounts up to $5,000 and $1,000. The cost of sending legal counsel to small claims court often exceeds the compensation amount the airline owes you, so they frequently settle rather than fight. Step 5. The timeline. Be prepared to wait. EU261 claims can take 4 to 12 weeks if handled directly with the airline. If you escalate to a government body, it can take 2 to 6 months. If you use a compensation company, they typically handle it within 8 to 16 weeks. If you go to small claims court, figure 2 to 4 months. This is why persistence matters. You can't expect instant payment. You have to be prepared to follow through for months if necessary. The real numbers. Here's what the data shows about success rates. For EU, 261 claims filed directly with airlines. Approximately 68 to 75% are eventually paid if the passenger provides comprehensive documentation and is willing to escalate. For EU, 261 claims handled by compensation companies, 97% success rate. For US DOT complaints, approximately 40 to 50% result in compensation because US regulations are weaker. For small claims court, 60 to 75% success rate if you have proper documentation. The pattern is clear. Companies and courts that enforce the rules get better results than dealing with airlines directly. But even direct claims work if you're persistent and professional. The critical mistake. Here's the one thing that will absolutely guarantee you fail. Accepting the airline's initial offer without filing a formal claim first. If you accept that $50 voucher or any settlement the airline proposes without going through the formal claims process, you've likely waived your right to claim the full legal amount. The airline will argue that you accepted settlement. Don't do it. File the formal claim first. Then, after you've established your legal position, you can negotiate if you choose to, but never, ever accept an initial settlement offer as your first move. The mindset. I want you to adopt a specific mindset as you go through this process. You are not asking for a favor. You are not begging. You are collecting a debt that the airline owes you by law. They are not being generous by paying. They are being obedient to the law. This mindset matters because it changes how you approach the process. You're not grateful for $600. You're not compromising when you accept $400 instead of $600. You're claiming what's rightfully yours. The airline is counting on you feeling like you're being unreasonable if you push for your full legal compensation. Don't fall for it. You're not being unreasonable. You're being assertive about rights that exist in law. This is how you win. The 2025 EU 261 reforms, the closing window. I need to tell you something that creates an urgent window of opportunity. And I need to be direct about it because this affects your decision to act now versus later. The EU 261 regulation, the most powerful passenger protection law in the world, is being rewritten right now, as in this exact moment, this month, this year. And the changes are going to dramatically reduce the compensation you're entitled to claim. Here's what's happening. For 21 years, EU 261 has mandated fixed compensation for delays of 3 hours or more. It's been rock solid, unchanging, unquestionable. Airlines have hated it, but it's been the law. In 2024 to 2025, the European Union opened the regulation for revision, and the airline industry pounced. They flooded the process with lobbying efforts, studies, arguments, and pressure to weaken passenger protection. The current proposal on the table, and this is being debated right now in the European Parliament and Council, contains several major changes. First, the delay threshold is being increased. Instead of compensation kicking in at 3 hours of delay, the new proposal suggests 4 hours for shorter flights and 6 hours for longer flights. Let's be clear about what this means. If you're delayed 3.5 hours under the new rules, you get nothing. Zero. You would have been entitled to €250 under the old rules. Under the new rules, you're out of luck. Second, the compensation amounts are being reduced. Instead of the fixed €250, €600 scale, the proposal suggests €300, €500. That might not sound like much, but it's a 15 to 20% reduction in compensation across the board. Third, the definition of extraordinary circumstances is being broadened. This is the airline industry's escape hatch, and they're trying to make it even wider. Airlines want bad weather, air traffic delays, and operational failures to all qualify as extraordinary circumstances that excuse them from paying compensation. If these changes pass, and they likely will, you're looking at a fundamental weakening of passenger protection that hasn't been seen since EU261 was first enacted in 2004. Here's the timeline. The regulation is being voted on in the European Parliament right now, December 2025. If it passes here, it goes to the Council of the EU for a second vote. That's expected in early 2026. If approved, there's typically a 12 to 18-month implementation period before the new rules take effect. So the new regulation would likely go into effect sometime in 2026 or 2027. But here's the critical part. The new regulations will likely not apply retroactively to past delays, meaning if you experienced a delay before the new rules take effect, you're entitled to the compensation under the old rules, the stronger rules. The full €250, €600 amounts, the 3-hour threshold, this creates a closing window. If you have a delay claim from 2023, 2024, or 2025, you need to file that claim now. Once the new regulations take effect, you might lose eligibility for those claims. Or worse, you might find yourself in a legal gray zone where the airline argues that the new rules should apply to your old claim. Don't let that happen. Act now. And here's something else you should know. The airline industry doesn't want you to know about this window. They're not advertising the fact that the regulations are changing. They're not telling passengers, hey, you have limited time to claim under the old rules. Instead, they're hoping you continue to accept vouchers and ignore your rights until the new, weaker regulations take effect. This is calculated strategy on their part. They're literally running out the clock on the stronger regulations while quietly lobbying to replace them with weaker ones. According to analysis from passenger rights organizations, if the proposed changes pass, airlines could save between €3 billion annually in compensation payouts. That's how much weaker the new regulations are. That's how much the airline industry stands to gain by weakening passenger protection. And guess who pays for those savings? You do. Every passenger who would have been entitled to €600 under the old rules but gets nothing under the new rules because their delay exceeded 6 hours is essentially giving the airline thousands of euros in savings. This is why I'm saying it with urgency. If you have a delay claim, file it now. Not next month. Not after the new year. Now. Because the window is closing, and you don't know exactly when it will slam shut. Let me give you the worst case scenario. Imagine you experienced a delay in 2024. Under current EU261, you're entitled to €600. You don't file a claim because you're busy, because you forgot, because you didn't know the rules. Now it's late 2025, and the new regulations have just passed Parliament. The airline immediately argues that the new rules apply to all pending claims, including your old one. Suddenly, your €600 claim becomes a €500 claim. Or worse, if your delay was 4 to 6 hours, you might get nothing at all. That's a loss of €100, €600 per person, per claim. For a family of 4, that's €400, 2,000. €400 in lost compensation because you waited too long. Now, imagine that scenario happening to millions of passengers across Europe. That's hundreds of millions of euros in compensation that passengers lose because they didn't understand the urgency of acting before the regulations changed. The airline industry is counting on exactly this. They're counting on passenger inertia. They're counting on people like you saying, I'll file a claim eventually, and then never actually doing it until the opportunity has passed. Here's my direct advice. If you experienced a significant delay departing from the EU in 2023, 2024, or 2025, File a claim this week. Right now. Today. Don't wait for perfect documentation. Don't wait until you're less busy. Don't wait for the new year. File now while the old, stronger regulations are still in effect. You can file directly with the airline. You can use a compensation company. You can file with your national enforcement body. But whatever method you choose, get that claim submitted while the current EU261 rules are still law. Because once they change, the window closes, and you'll be kicking yourself for leaving money on the table. This is not speculation. This is not me trying to scare you into action. This is the documented reality of what's happening in European regulatory bodies right now. The airline industry is weakening your rights while you're distracted by life. Don't let them get away with it. Comparing your options. Direct versus companies versus legal. You now understand your rights. You understand the compensation amounts. You understand the urgency. But you're probably asking yourself, how do I actually pursue this claim? What's my best option? There are 4 primary paths you can take. Each has advantages and disadvantages. Let me walk you through them so you can make an informed decision. Option 1. File directly with the airline. This is the DIY approach. You file a formal claim with the airline directly and negotiate with them. Advantages. You keep 100% of the compensation. There's no commission. If you're owed €600, you get €600. You maintain complete control of the process and timeline. Some airlines will settle quickly to avoid escalation, meaning you could have money in your account within 2 to 4 weeks. It's free to attempt. Disadvantages. Airlines are incentivized to delay, deny, and frustrate you into giving up. You have to handle all documentation, follow-up, and escalation yourself. If the airline denies your claim, you have to take the next step, which requires additional effort and knowledge. You're navigating a process the airline has deliberately designed to be confusing and discouraging. Most passengers who file directly don't follow through to escalation. So airlines know that attrition works in their favor. Success rate. According to data from the Civil Aviation Authority and passenger rights organizations, approximately 68 to 75% of comprehensive, well-documented direct claims eventually result in payment if the passenger is willing to escalate beyond initial rejection. The key word here is if. Most passengers don't escalate. Most passengers get a denial letter and give up. So the actual success rate for passengers who file directly and do nothing else is closer to 30 to 40%. Timeline 6 to 16 weeks if the airline settles quickly, 3 to 6 months if you have to escalate to a regulatory body. Option 2. Use a flight compensation company. This is the professional approach. Companies like Flightright, Flightdash, Delayed.co.uk, AirAdvisor, and others handle the entire process for you. How it works. You provide them with your flight details and documentation. They assess your claim eligibility. Takes 1 to 2 days. If your claim is eligible, they file with the airline on your behalf. If the airline denies or doesn't respond, they escalate to the relevant regulatory body. If necessary, they take the airline to court. Once they win, they take their commission and send you the remainder. Advantages. You do almost no work. They handle everything. They have 97% success rate on valid claims because they have lawyers, regulatory relationships, and experience. They can afford to escalate to court because they handle volume. You get payment even if you have incomplete documentation because they know how to work with what you have. They provide regular updates and transparency about where your claim stands. Disadvantages. You lose 20 to 30% of your compensation to their commission. If you're owed €600, you might only receive €420, €480 after fees. There's a slight delay in processing compared to direct filing. You're trusting a third party with your claim. Commission structure. Most companies charge 20 to 30% of successful claims. Some charge 25% flat. A few charge upfront fees if claims are rejected, which most charge no upfront fee, only commission on successful claims. Success rate, 97% on valid claims that are properly documented and within the applicable regulations. Timeline, 8 to 16 weeks from submission to payment. The math. If your claim is worth €600 and you file directly, you get €600 if successful. but you have a 68 to 75% chance of success if you're willing to escalate. If your claim is worth 600 euros and you use a company, you get 420 euros, 480 euros after their 20 to 30% commission. But you have a 97% chance of success. Expected value. Direct. 600 euros times 0.72 equals 432 euros. Expected value 480 euros times 0. 97 equals 466 euros. Statistically, using a company gives you slightly better expected value once you factor in success probability. Plus, you save yourself months of effort and stress. Option 3. File with a regulatory body. For EU261 claims, you can bypass the airline and file directly with your national enforcement body, the Civil Aviation Authority, UK, the Luftfahrtbundesamt, Germany, the DGAC, etc. Advantages. These are government agencies with enforcement power. Airlines take them seriously. You keep 100% of compensation if successful. The regulatory body handles the investigation, so you don't have to prove your case as rigorously. It's often free to file. Disadvantages. Government agencies are notoriously slow. Expect 4 to 12 months for resolution. The enforcement body might recommend payment rather than mandate it, which is weaker than a court judgment. If the airline ignores the recommendation, you still have to pursue additional legal action. Each country's enforcement body operates differently, so the process varies. Success rate 60 to 80% depending on the country and the strength of your documentation. Timeline 4 to 12 months. Option 4. Small claims court. This is the legal route. You sue the airline in small claims court for the compensation amount plus costs and interest. Advantages. You keep 100% of compensation if you win. A court judgment is binding. The airline can't ignore it. The process, while formal, is designed for non-lawyers. You don't need an attorney. Many small claims courts allow claims up to $5,000, $10,000, depending on jurisdiction. Courts often award interest and court costs, so you might recover more than the base compensation. Disadvantages. It's more formal and intimidating than other options. You have to navigate legal procedure and deadlines. You might want to hire an attorney anyway, which costs money. If you lose, you've spent time and possibly money for nothing. The airline might counter-argue and complicate the case. Success rate 60 to 75% if you have proper documentation and a valid claim. Timeline 2 to 4 months from filing to resolution. My recommendation, here's how I would approach this decision. If your claim is under 250 euros and you want to maximize recovery, file directly with the airline and follow through to escalation if they deny. The amount isn't big enough to justify a 25% commission, and you're only risking a few hours of your time. If your claim is 250 euros, 600 euros, and you're busy or intimidated by the process, use a compensation company. The peace of mind and high success rate are worth the 25% commission. If your claim is 600 euros plus, and you're willing to spend 4 to 12 months pursuing it, file directly with the airline or the regulatory body. The amount is significant enough that retaining 100% is worth the effort. If you're in the United States with a DOT claim, file a formal complaint with the DOT and give it 3 to 4 months. If they don't resolve it, consider small claims court as your next step. The reality check? Let me be direct. Most passengers won't take any of these steps. They'll watch this video, feel motivated, and then do nothing. They'll accept the voucher, they'll move on. And the airline will have won. The passengers who actually claim their compensation are the ones who are willing to take action. Not necessarily legal action. Not necessarily hiring lawyers. Just action. Filing a form. Sending an email. Following up. Pushing through to the next step when denied. The compensation companies exist because they understand this psychology. They know that most passengers won't fight for their money, even when the law is on their side. So they've built a business model around being the proxy fighter for passengers who don't want to fight themselves. There's no shame in using a compensation company and getting paid 70 to 75% of what you're owed while avoiding 6 months of frustration. But there's also no reason to accept a $50 voucher when you could get 600 euros by spending a few hours filing a claim yourself. The choice is yours. But the choice only exists if you actually make it. Conclusion and call to action. The final truth. Let me bring this full circle. You started watching this video stressed and exhausted from a delayed flight. You were offered a $50 voucher. You probably felt like that was the end of the story. You were wrong, and now you know it. Here's what I want you to understand. The airline industry has built an empire on your ignorance. They have legal teams, compliance departments, and strategic communication experts whose job is to make sure you never find out what you're entitled to. They spend millions of dollars every year on lobbying efforts to weaken passenger protection laws. They deliberately bury compensation information in fine print. They make the claim process as confusing and intimidating as possible. And it works. It works because most people don't know. And even among the people who do know, most people don't take action. In 2024, over 218,000 flight disruptions occurred in the European Union alone. Based on conservative estimates, that's roughly 2 to 3 million passengers affected. If even half of those passengers were entitled to compensation, that's 1 million passengers. And based on filing data, probably only 50,000 to 100,000 of them actually claimed anything. Do the math. That's roughly 900,000 to 950,000 passengers who left money on the table. How much money are we talking about? At an average of 400 euros per claim, that's 360 euros, 380 million that went unclaimed. That's not a rounding error. That's not a minor loss. That's a systematic theft of hundreds of millions of euros, enabled by passenger apathy and airline suppression of information. And that's just Europe. Add in the United States, where DOT regulations are even weaker and claim rates are even lower, and you're talking about billions of dollars in unclaimed compensation. The airline industry knows these numbers. They celebrate them, because every dollar that passengers don't claim is a dollar they keep. But here's what terrifies them. An informed, persistent passenger. A passenger who knows their rights. A passenger who documents properly. A passenger who files a formal claim and doesn't give up when the airline issues a generic denial. A passenger who escalates. A passenger who uses every tool available to them. That passenger wins. That passenger gets paid. And that passenger costs the airline money they would have otherwise kept. So let me ask you directly. Which passenger are you going to be? Are you going to be the 95% who accepts the voucher, watches this video, feels momentarily empowered, and then does nothing? Are you going to be part of the system that the airlines have designed, where your ignorance is their profit? Or are you going to be the 5% who takes action? Here's what you need to do right now. If you experienced a flight delay or cancellation in the past 6 years, or 5 years if you're in Scotland, and especially if it was within the last 2 years, do this today. Step 1. Find your original booking confirmation. Look for your flight number, date, and the exact delay time. Step 2. Identify which regulation applies. Was your flight departing from the EU, UK, or EEA? Was it international? Was it US domestic? Go to flightrights.com or AirAdvisor and answer their quick questions. It takes 90 seconds. Step 3. Decide your path. Are you going to file directly? Use a compensation company? File with a regulatory body? Make that decision. Step 4. Take action. File the claim today, right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because every day you wait is another day the airline gets to keep money that's legally yours. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I'll do it later. You're thinking, I'm too busy right now. You're thinking, it's probably too complicated. Stop. These are the thoughts that the airline industry has trained you to have. They're comfortable thoughts. They're thoughts that benefit the airline, not you. The reality is this. Filing a claim takes 30 to 60 minutes of your time. That's it. 30 to 60 minutes to potentially claim hundreds or thousands of dollars. If you make even minimum wage, that's the best return on time investment you'll get anywhere. But you have to do it. No one else is going to do it for you. The airline certainly won't voluntarily pay you. The government won't mail you a check. You have to take action. And here's the urgency part again. The EU261 regulations are changing. The window is closing. If you have a delay claim from 2023, 2024, or 2025, the clock is ticking. File now while the current, stronger regulations are in effect. Because once the new regulations take effect in 2026 to 2027, you might find your rights significantly reduced. This isn't speculation. This is happening right now in Brussels as we speak. Before you close this video, I need you to take 3 actions. Action 1. Subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the secrets that corporations don't want you to know. You'll get videos on airline rights, consumer protection, financial exploitation, and how to fight back. This is knowledge that the system doesn't want you to have. You need it. Action 2. Like and comment. Let me know in the comments. Have you accepted a voucher for a delay? Have you filed a compensation claim? What was your experience? Your comments help the algorithm, which means more people see this information and get empowered to claim what they're owed. Action 3. Share. Send this video to someone you know who flies regularly. Send it to your family, send it to your friends, send it to your colleagues. The airline industry's power depends on secrecy. Every person you inform is one fewer person they can manipulate with a $50 voucher. The final truth. That $50 voucher the gate agent offered you? That's not compensation. That's an insult. That's proof that the airline knows they owe you more, and they're betting you're too exhausted and too ignorant to claim it. It's a strategic payoff designed to suppress a much larger claim. You deserve better. The law says you deserve better. And if you take action, you can get better. The airline industry has built a covert game where they win through your silence. But the moment you understand the rules and refuse to play their game, everything changes. You go from being a passive victim to being an empowered claimant. And they're terrified of that. That's why they work so hard to keep you ignorant. That's why they suppress this information. That's why they offer vouchers instead of cash. But now you know. You have the knowledge. The only question is whether you're going to use it. Don't be the person who watches this video and does nothing. Don't be part of the 95% that accepts the system as it is. Be the person who files the claim. Be the person who fights back. Be the person who proves to the airline that you know your rights and you're willing to use them. The money is yours. They're just hoping you don't take it. Take it.